Hi, folks. Jennifer Nelson here, founder of Scout Real Estate. Glad you're listening in. I created Pocket Hours podcast to elevate our game and help us all learn from the best. I have interviewed some of the top producers in our industry about best practices, among many other things. We also tackle industry issues and changes with great conversation from many of our leaders. And the best part is you get clock hours just for listening in. After you have listened to 3 episodes, just email info@scoutrealestate.com to answer a few easy questions for the interview, and you will receive your certificate. Meanwhile, enjoy listening and learning, and go out there and be the agent you would hire. I have the privilege this morning of interviewing Molly Kemper. Molly has been in this industry for 7 years, and she is a dynamo. She is doing, with her partner, Scott Monroe, around 60 some deals per year. And the reason for that, as you'll hear in this interview, is her attention to detail, her strategy, really putting the client first, treating this like a business, going to the office every day, communication, a real plan around key milestone communications with their clients, and touring, among many other things. You're going to gain a lot from this interview. Molly is smart, and she comes at this from a really cool perspective. So without further ado, here's Molly Kemper. Molly and I have probably met each other just a handful of times, but I have been following her career because it's something to follow. So I was super excited that while I had to twist her arm just a little bit to get her to come on the show, she is here with us today. Molly, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Jennifer. Honestly. Yeah, it's definitely out of my comfort zone here.
Yep, it's going to be great. I'm excited to have you. And I think one of the reasons why I was excited to have you, obviously, is because you've had a really amazing start to this real estate industry. We're going to get into that in a minute. But I wanted to sort of talk a little bit about your past and your former career. And I know the incredible tie over that you're going to tell us about. But so first of all, who are you? Kids, family, pets? Tell us a little bit about Molly.
I joke and say I'm, one of the 5 people from Seattle that still lives in Seattle. I was actually born in the North End in Richmond Beach, which is in Shoreline. Okay. And I've lived all over the city. I became a West Seattle native in 2009. I moved here to West Seattle in 2009. I have 2 kids, Gus and Tegan, and one's at Madison and the other at Alki, and a husband, and life's pretty good.
That's awesome. What brought you, I should say, to West Seattle?
My husband, he was my boyfriend at the time. I was living in Green Lake in a 690 square foot condo that I purchased in the worst real estate month you possibly could in history in 2006 in May. We got together after that and wanted, it was a little bit tight living in that condo by ourselves. And so we wanted to get a house. And if you remember, that was during the Great Recession. This is, around 2009. And It was a little bit, things were bleak. Let's just say that, looking for real estate across things. Even though there was a lot of houses on the market, it wasn't necessarily fitting the bill. And so we had some family in West Seattle and decided to give it a try.
And you're loving it. I love it.
Yes, West Seattle's definitely changed a lot.
Oh my gosh, hasn't it? For sure. I lived here for the first time many, many years ago before I actually moved here for good. I was in a tiny, tiny house on Morgan Street as you go up the hill toward 35th and rented there for a little bit. And that was my first introduction to West Seattle. So, okay, so talk to me about prior career, prior life. What were you doing before you decided to do real estate?
Well, let's see. When I went to WSU, I actually took the real estate test when I was in college there. And passed it. But the thought of jumping into real estate was a little too frightening to me, just, direct out of school. I kind of found myself in the commercial architecture interior design world. I started a small company in Pioneer Square, around 20 folks in that firm, Studio Mangster Zara. And I was really fortunate because the primary owner, Charles Strazara, was fantastic and took me under his wing and kind of mentored me. And so I started out in an administrative assistant role and moved my way up into the marketing side of things. So I spent my first 4 years there, but I didn't have any peers in marketing. So I then jumped to a larger firm called Callison. It's now Callison RTKL. It's one of the largest firms in the world. But there I was able to work on a larger marketing team. And eventually I was able to kind of grow that and move into director roles at a couple of different large scale firms. So it was pretty fun. We got to work on everything from single family homes, large multifamily homes, man made islands in the Middle East, large scale mixed use developments in Southeast Asia, you name it. So I worked on in a variety of capacities, mostly on the strategy side of things, looking at emerging economies. But I just always loved the real estate and development side of things. I liked what real estate does for communities. And it was a great opportunity for me to learn about a lot of different cultures and places around the world and learn, kind of nerdy fun facts about areas and feed my curiosity. So it was a great experience.
I'm guessing, and I think I'm right in this, you traveled then quite a bit for this work.
I was fortunate. I had a fellowship at one point in time. It took me to Japan and to China. And, I made, another trip to China. I made domestic trips. But for the most part, it was more behind the scenes and feeding the partners information. So,
got it.
So it was mostly setting them up for success.
Got it. And so you talked a little bit about strategy and research. And so I can't help but just jump to the next question because I'm just dying to know. So you found yourself drawn to real estate back again. Talk to me just about how and when you said, okay, now I'm ready to do this.
My son was, I think, 5 years old and starting at Alki Elementary. My last position was at a company called MG2, fantastic company. I was doing a lot less international work, but honestly, I'd had 20 years in that, and I'm a workaholic, so I was working really kind of some insane hours prior to that, and probably the whole experience burned me out on marketing, and I was just ready to do something new. And so my son was starting at Alki, and I thought, maybe it's time for me to make this career change. I laugh at this when I think about this now. I thought, oh, that will provide me more of a balanced life because my life was a little insane before. But I was just ready. I was ready. And so I guess that was around 7 years ago that I made that change.
Okay. 7 years ago. Okay. So 7 years ago, you start real estate. And are you still at the same firm that you began in?
Yeah, it's a funny thing. So I knew a couple of agents that were at this Windermere office. I'm at Windermere West Metro, right in the junction. And I knew a couple of agents there, and the designated broker, the manager of the office, Larry Johnson, I actually went to junior high with in high school. So I knew a few people in the office. So it's one of those small world things. There's actually a lot of people from Richmond Beach that live in West Seattle. There's something kind of very similar in the community. It's just kind of an urban version of it. So it was an easy choice for me. I knew I wanted to be working in my backyard, and I wanted to be kind of right in the center of things. As somebody that's grown up in Seattle, I had a great appreciation for the Windermere brand. So it was an easy choice for me.
So this is the exciting part. It wasn't necessarily the last question, but here's the new question. And that is to say, you did a lot of research for your last position, many positions, and so and some strategy work. And so I want you to sort of tell the listeners how does this cross over? I mean, I can only imagine many ways, but how have you seen sort of your past life and your work now represented in your current real estate career?
Whew, that's a big question, but you're right. It crosses over in many different ways. Probably from just how I practice my business on a regular basis, as well as what we provide for our clients. I work as a team with another agent, Scott Monroe, who's fantastic. And we have very similar minds and very different minds. But one thing that we share in common is that we're both very analytical. And so I like to look at things from both macro and micro perspectives. So what are overall market trends that we're seeing? And what are something that we're seeing just down the street? We all have, anecdotes about things that we've seen as well in the market. So we always say it's a combination of art and science, and we're blending those things together. And so when we're looking at research, I like to look, this is based on my old life. Again, starting at the macro, I'm not just looking at what's happening in Seattle or even just nationwide. I actually like to look at things from a global perspective and then just kind of hone it down. One of the most fascinating things for me in my former life was back when the Great Recession happened. I was doing some research in the Philippines and in Hong Kong and Shenzhen, and it was seeing the impact that the American recession had on their local economies and how they were talking about it outright. But so it was, I learned a lot through that process. And then I also learned that there are some best practices that are being used in other parts of the world that could be afforded here as well. Sometimes it's just conceptual thinking, but it's things that I like to think about for our clients here as well. I think it was 2004, I had a fellowship and I went to China. And part of that was trying to determine whether the same issues in China were the same issues that we were experiencing and talking about in America, and how we were positioning our company and our brand. And are they talking about placemaking? Are they talking about community? And through my travels and what I found, absolutely, it was the same thing. I learned something in the process as far as meeting with different clients and what they're looking for and how stories are told. And that brings me back to real estate. It's very much the same thing, looking at who the audience is, what are they looking for in a community. There's a lot of crossovers there. So I like to still stay up to date on trends and what we're seeing in local communities and how that might impact our buyers, our sellers as they're moving forward, be it with light rail or be it with transitions to downtown and what kind of business offerings or entertainment or other things that are coming into play. It's helpful for our clients to be a source of information and a wealth of information to then help them make sure that they're making the right decisions.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can only imagine that, you line up a couple of real estate agents and everybody comes at this a different way, right? So our industry is
Yeah.
interesting in that. And some people, I think a vast majority of real estate agents are about a sale, unfortunately. So they're thinking about, what house can I get them in and how fast can I do it so that I can get a commission? And then flip that on its head completely to people
Yeah.
like you who understand this as a service industry and are providing such a different level of service to say, hey, buyer, we're not worried that we're going to get paid. We're pretty certain and confident in our work that we're going to have income. So we have food with our meals. We're okay. But what we're really concerned about is and interested in is helping you understand from a broader perspective where and what you want to buy, thinking outside the box, bringing in questions that maybe you haven't even thought of because you're just thinking, I need to buy a house. And you're like, how about this? And what
Right.
about this? And hey, did you know this is close to the light rail? Hey, seller, did you know that if you sell now or if you wait a couple years, you'll make more money because of this and that and the other? So listeners, just pay attention. If you're newer in the industry, this isn't about sales. Real honestly, this is actually a service job. So thanks for pointing that out. You talked a little bit about strategy, and that's such a loaded word. So I
Yeah.
want to unpack it just for a minute with you to say, let's go really granular. You're sitting down with a seller in West
Mhm.
Seattle. Tell us a little bit about some strategies that you use to position them for market.
It really begins with listening at the start, right? So Scott and I will be meeting with clients and we're starting with just trying to understand what their goals are in the process. We want to give them as much direct and candid information as we can. They're going to find out sooner or later. We know of folks that are, trying to just tell them what they want to hear, but we try and, be as direct as possible and guide them on best practices and to let them know about, like you said, different strategies that would potentially be beneficial. Like you said, different times of the year that are stronger than others to sell. But really, like I said, it goes back to what they're trying to do. Are they trying to wring every dollar out of their house? Because, for most people, it is their nest egg, it is their greatest investment. Or are they really in a position of stress and anxiety? And really, it's about, calming their fears and helping to guide them and understand we've got your back. We're here for your best interest. So it starts with listening and asking questions. From there, we take that information and we do a comparative market analysis like most folks. We probably do ours a little bit differently than others. I'm not kidding when I say we probably spend 8 to 10 hours putting them together each. Scott's looking at data, I'm looking at data. We're both coming up with what we believe the key issues are with a property, be it positive and things that we need to improve. And then we kind of come together, we banter, we arm wrestle, and we combine our thoughts. And then we put together a report and a plan. It's really information heavy, but it's designed so that it's the type of information that I would want to have if I was a seller. And so from there, if they are feeling good about what they're seeing or reading, from there, that's when we start to build out a plan. It's very, very specific to their property. And when we're talking strategy, we'll build out milestone schedules, we'll work backwards. We will, of course, we'll do things like managing vendors and getting the house prepped and so forth. But we're also providing them with data along the way. We're going to, tour properties. We're going to help the sellers understand how their house is positioned against the competition. And then we go all the way up until game day. And that's when we'll finalize our strategy with them. And we'll adjust according to what we're seeing in the market.
I remember, I think, Molly, you know this, but Scott Monroe is one of my mentors and has been for years. So I call him often. I think many do, but we go way back. And so
Yeah.
I was happy when he told me that you all were teaming up. And I said, yeah, you need a yin to your yang, or a yang to your yin, whatever that is. So I'm glad that you all are together. But one of the things he told me along the way is, tell the truth from the beginning to your clients. They'll trust you and they'll rely on it. And so I love that you said that. I also know that the CMAs that you all do, I remember we had a class one time and I had 3 or 4 different high producing brokers on this panel. And I said, I'd love for you to share what you do in a listing presentation. And, we started over here on the left, and this woman pulled out this, this dog and pony show. Is that the right way to say that? I don't even know.
Yeah.
Anyway, everything was glossy and pretty, and there's nothing wrong with this. I'm not making fun of it. I'm just saying in juxtaposition to where we ended. So, fancy and tabs and notebooks and all the things. And then different people were sort of doing similar renditions of that. And then finally we get to Scott, who's at the end of the table, and he pulls out a couple sheets of paper that are scribbled all over, right? Just absolutely. It dawned on me that this, for him, and I know for you, that the work that you're doing, you talked about this 8 to 10 hours per CMA, that the work that you're doing is to say there is a lot of research that actually goes into figuring out the right price for the house. And I think agents just willy-nilly sort of, throw out numbers, and they can maybe get it right every now and then, but they don't really dig in, and that's a disservice to their client. So those hours spent are really, really good.
You're right. And honestly, we know that most sellers probably don't read every single word that's in the CMA. In fact, if they can read the headlines, that's great. They're human. They flip to the section that's like, how much is my house worth? We know that. But what the CMA does, and this is the most important part, is it gives us the confidence in what we are telling them. So the CMA report is as much for us as it is for them. We all have gut reactions when we walk into a property, right? You think, okay, it's worth X, but it's really important to go back and see if you can back that up with the science part of it, right? As agents, we need to do both for our clients. We know there's sometimes outliers. We know that sometimes we can't prove it. Sometimes it is a gut feeling, but the more often that we're able to help demonstrate our thinking, the better it is for everyone. And our industry is really tough. Professional services in general is basically trust-based, right? You get that through demonstrating, it's showing versus telling. It's something that I think is important. This is going to sound like a slam, and I don't mean it this way. The bar to entry into real estate is really low. We're not attorneys. We're not architects. We don't have to go through, countless years to get into the industry. So there is a wide range of real estate agents out there. It's one of the great things about the industry is that you can be a part-time agent, but it's also one of the things that kind of holds us back sometimes. So I think we all owe that to our clients to demonstrate our level of professionalism and to show them just how thoughtful we're being and we're not taking it lightly. Because again, it is such an important financial consideration for so many folks.
I like how you blended the art and science there that you spoke of earlier, because I know, Molly, that if I called you tomorrow and I sent you a West Seattle address, that really likely you could probably nail it on price without even seeing it, because probably you've seen it before. You do enough listings that you could get really close, if not in the ballpark. But I know that if I asked you for a price opinion, what you would likely say is, here's what I can tell you off the cuff, but there's no way that I would count on that number until I was able to do a lot more research. And I appreciate that thoroughness. The other thing I want to say is, I don't know if you've ever heard this, but someone told me the state requires more hours for someone to be a hairstylist to get their license than for a real estate agent. And nothing against hairstylists. Thank God we need them and they're awesome. But it's interesting to me that when we're dealing with the kinds of money that we deal with and the level, right, that we are at in terms of people's financial investments, that it's, like you said, it's a low bar. It's a low bar to get in. So distinguishing yourself, listeners, to say, how are you being the best at what you do? Because there is a wide variety of agent out there. Not every agent's created equal, for sure. Let's switch gears just for a second. What's hard about this industry for you? What do you think? If I never had to do that again, I wouldn't be sad at all.
This is going to sound funny, but the hardest thing for me is my natural tendency is that I like to be anonymous. I like to be in the shadows. The fact that I'm on, camera talking in front of a group of people is not my normal thing. Ironically, in my former careers, I had to do that as well. That is probably the hardest thing. It might seem like a minor thing, but honestly, being an anonymous real estate agent is, not really great for your business if you think about that. I'm the last person that wants to talk about that when I'm talking to friends, for instance, because I never want people to feel like they're a mark. I probably put up barriers and walls that I shouldn't do. And it's something that, again, I'm not looking at folks as a mark, but I'm always insecure about that they might feel that. So that's one of the harder things that I have. It's probably one of the reasons why Scott and I are such a great team, because I am the opposite of him. Not to say that Scott is all about himself. I don't mean to suggest that, but he already has name recognition within the industry. And he is personality plus, and, he's out there. And so that's kind of how I navigated that. That's honestly probably the hardest thing.
Yeah, and that goes in line with when I asked Molly to be on the show. Huge, like big sigh, and sort of like, really, man, that is not my forte. I don't love it. But by the way, you're doing great. This is a fun conversation. So thanks for being here.
Thanks.
Pocket Hours is brought to you by Scout Real Estate. Hi, I'm Jennifer Nelson, owner at Scout Real Estate. I started this firm with the vision of doing things differently, with our focus on legendary service for our clients and creating a community of producing agents to spur each other to do higher quality work. If you are interested in learning more about how a small group of like-minded brokers have come together to have some fun while doing a lot of business, reach out to me, 206-227-7966, or email jennifer@scoutrealestate.com. I promise you this, fun is a high priority for me, but so is winning. So if you appreciate those two things, you might be interested in Scout. Looking forward to hearing from you. Let's talk a little bit for the listeners about your beginning. So you had a different beginning than most people do, I think, if I know this correctly, but you started in the real estate career, and tell us about that first year. What was it like?
Even though I led a team of people in my former life, I'm kind of a natural lone wolf in the way that I go about things. So that was great. I'm somebody that just kind of likes to roll up my sleeves and kind of fumble my way through things and kind of research everything and figure out best practices. But at the same time, what you realize in real estate is that it can be a very lonely business as well. It's different than a corporate world where you have, bosses and peers and other things that are, relying on you to deliver on your end so they can do their work. I'm one of these dorky people that still goes into the office every single day. I have to do that because it's part of my discipline. But I remember one of my first few weeks on the job, I wasn't coming to the office because I wasn't feeling well. And I was so just like, what do I do? Do I call somebody or not? It was just such a foreign world to me to just not show up. But in many ways, it was my background lended itself well because I was able to quickly identify a business plan for myself for 1, 3, and 5 years and put down, goals, tactics, strategies, and things that I wanted to achieve. My first year, I wanted to be really, really, how do I say it, deliberate and slow. I wasn't looking to all of a sudden go from 0 to 60 really fast. I believe my goal was to do 3 to 5 transactions my first year. I wanted to learn every single aspect of it because I know that I gain confidence again and I'm able to help my clients by knowing the ins and outs, be it of contracts, be it of timelines of things to expect and so forth. So that first year, I had moments of panic, just like everybody else does, of like, oh my gosh, I know it's going to take time for me to build up my business, but there's a difference between knowing and feeling, I always say. Intellectually, I can know that. I know when you start a business, it takes a few years to get off the ground, but you feel very, very different, especially if you're a competitive and driven person like I am. So I had my moments of tears, just like everybody else probably does, or at least I assume they do. I remember my first transaction, I was doing an open house for Don Leverett and picked up a buyer from the open house. My very first transaction was a co-op, which that was that's a
Big
whole
learning
other
experience.
process in itself. Yes, that was a big learning experience in itself. And then I just kind of went about my work. I don't remember how many transactions. I know I hit my goal, but I think I did 5 to 7, something like that, my first year, and felt good about things. And then from there, I wanted to double it, and then to keep going. I don't really care about volume. It's not that, but it was more about gaining experience so that I had expertise that I could lend to my clients.
Absolutely. So 7 years ago, and now we're up into the, between you and Scott, 60 some closings a year. Am I right about that?
I
You won't
think
even know,
last year,
right?
yeah, no, I know versus Scott. Scott doesn't pay attention
Okay.
at all. But I know not, again, because I'm trying to measure myself against other people, but more, we did a very, very detailed business plan this year. And I was analyzing where a business was coming from. Were we getting it from a referrals? Were we getting it repeat clients? Was it from open houses? Was it breaking it out into multiple different categories? So I'm looking at it from that standpoint. I was looking at it from where our business was. So yes, last year not included, yeah, around 60-ish in there. Last year was a fall off, and last year was interesting. We had a lot more business outside of West Seattle. So I was just trying to look at trends and really how we want to run our business and how we want to move things forward.
And just for listeners, I know maybe you are already doing the math on this, but that is more than one transaction a week that you all are managing, and that's a lot of work. That's a lot of keeping things straight. And I know, because I've known Scott for years, that I am grateful for you, and so is he, because when I asked him once if he had a business plan, he didn't. He was like, "I don't even know what you're talking about." So you are bringing a lot of things to the plate for him, and I know he for you. So just for a minute before we launch into the buyer broker agreement, what's it like being on a team? What would you say are the strengths of that, and what's hard about being on a team?
I think I'm really lucky in many ways because, like you said, for Scott, Scott has a lot of really amazing qualities that complement mine, but he is not necessarily system driven. When we started working together, he was flying down to New Zealand and asked me to cover his business. This is about 5 years ago. And then a few months later, we just started working together, and it just kind of happened organically. We didn't ever sit down and divide up responsibilities. It was just very, very obvious where he needed help and where he shined, and vice versa. I've heard horror stories for other folks, and that part we've been really, really fortunate on, that we have a good rhythm of business. I'll put it that way, rhythm to our business, I should say. And it's fantastic. I have kids that are competitive athletes, and I travel a lot for that. And I try and also enjoy some downtime as well. And so I have a partner that I know I can trust back home when I'm away on things. So that's pretty awesome. The challenges with being with a team are, at the same time, we are not the same person, and we do have different ideas about things. And sometimes the efficiencies aren't quite there because you have to have redundancy. It's something that's to the benefit of all, having the redundancy. But like I said at the start, I'm kind of naturally a lone wolf person. So I'm just kind of, I know things intuitively. I just kind of move along. So that's actually one of the challenges, is to have to slow down sometimes so that we have the important conversations that need to occur.
as in life and always, right? It seems like the strength and the weaknesses are real close together, right?
Absolutely.
So the very thing that makes you the dynamic team that you are is also the thing that can slow you down. But you all obviously have an incredible business, and congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Okay, so January 1, we knew about this long before, but January 1, the state decided to do a buyer broker agreement, as you're aware. And I'd be curious for the listeners, because this is going to be airing here in the next month or two. What have you found? How has that, or if that has shifted anything about how you do your work?
We never operated with buyer agency agreements before, prior to this year. So that definitely is an adjustment. Before, we had just worked hard to demonstrate our value and our expertise through practice. So for us, exclusive agreements, especially for those that we had been working for, yes, those are great. But we recognize for buyers that don't know us, we're going to need to work hard to earn their trust. So non-exclusive from the start is totally fine. We want to make them feel comfortable. And then again, we're just going to demonstrate our value along the way.
I like the way you're approaching that. And for the listeners out there, there's a lot of talk, as we all know right now, about you have to sign this immediately and it's law, and it's going to, the pendulum's going to swing. And I think there's going to be some backlash here from buyers that feel like, wait a minute, this was the intent of this was to help inform and educate. And what's ending up happening is that we're feeling coerced in a different way into having to work with this agent before they even barely breathe our name. And
Right.
I think there's some, hey, let's all take a breath and a beat here and realize the intent of this, and be able to say what we're trying to do is provide you service and have you know all of your rights and how we work and how we're compensated. And so if we can do that in a way that doesn't have you feeling like we're strong arming you into signing this piece of paper before we do any sort of real estating, I do think that's a balanced approach to this. And again, we're still pretty new. I mean, it's not quite March. This just has been 2 months of this. I wonder how this is going to play out for some of the discount brokers who, you can sign up online to go see a house, and now you're having to sign this entire document saying we're going to work with you before we even go look at a house, right?
They don't have to use exactly the state forms for the buyer agency agreement. So I want to be careful here on this, because I can't speak to every single brokerage and how they've set these up. But our understanding, at least for our form, is that you can unilaterally, cancel it at any given time. And I just think that's an important piece that buyers need to understand so that they aren't feeling pressured in the process. So they were well intentions, right? That's why they put this into place. I was talking to my sister. She's a federal judge in California, and talking to her about it. And she, before I even said anything, she immediately said, oh, that's going to cause some problems, because she could just tell right off the back that there was going to be some situations where people were taking advantage of things. And she said, there's an old saying apparently in law, I'm going to butcher it, but it's something like bad facts make bad laws. And basically what that means, or hard cases make, hard laws, meaning that they have to design laws for the exception, right? In our world, we might operate under, this is the 80% rule. It hits for 80%, but the law is often crafted for those extreme situations. And unfortunately, some negative consequences can happen from that. So I think, again, you have to just come from the buyer perspective, or thinking about what's in their best interest, and think about what's the spirit and the idea behind signing this agreement. And that is that we're taking care of them and we're guiding them the right way. And we want them to feel comfortable in the process.
For sure. It reminds me, someone once said, this is lowest common denominator real estate.
Yeah.
That we're having to protect from people that are out there for the wrong reasons. But what I appreciate about this is that it is causing some agents who didn't have consultations even at all to have to sit down and have even the smallest conversation with the people that they're representing.
Yeah.
Okay, so two more things, Molly, and this is going great. Thank you. I appreciate it. Two more things before we finish up. One would be, I'd love for you to talk about a few best practices, and I'll give you a second to think about that while I'm rambling. But for the listeners on this call that are brand new, and some, been here way longer than you've been practicing, they're looking to say, what can I gain from this conversation that I haven't already gained already that I could implement into my business? So are there a couple things that come to mind for you that say, if you could focus on a couple of these things, this might help you implement and have a stronger, more robust business? And then the second thing we're going to talk about as we end is just any predictions you might have for this year. You're coming from this from a research and development and strategic place from your last company. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about how potentially the rest of this year is going to pan out. So there you go. How's that for a really loaded question?
Really loaded. No, that's okay. I like to go on the record on things. So, I might be totally wrong, but I'll go on the record.
All
Uh,
right. I like it.
like I said, I am one of these dorky people that goes into the office every single day. I know that will get me in the mindset of focusing on business. Don't get me wrong. I want to be at home with my kids and my husband and, having a life as well. But I know the quickest way for me to be able to do that is by focusing on real estate every single day at the office. So part of that is my background, but it doesn't have to be your office, but just a space that that you can sit and focus on your work. So I don't have necessarily an exact way that I go through my business every single day, but I do start my business in the morning by literally thinking about every single client that's potentially out there. Typically, it's on Mondays, especially where I go through kind of robust handwriting action items for each one of them. Doesn't mean that I'm hitting them all on Monday. That's something that Scott and I use throughout the week. We have 2 large scale calendars on the back wall. We have clients divided up into a variety of categories, and we have, kind of more manual low tech systems, but they're very visual so that the 2 of us can see what's going on with things. So I would say one is just keep it professional and keep it like like truly the job that it should be. And I recognize that we all know things and we all know how the normal course of a transaction goes, but our clients don't. And so trying to keep them up to date as much as possible is really important, and doing that through multiple channels. So this is again where we have a great balance. Scott is much more of a phone person. He loves to pick up the phone. He loves to sit and have conversations over the phone. That is not my strength. I am much more of a let's document and break this down, be it key milestone schedules or tasks or activities that are coming up. So we try and balance those things out. And again, give the information to our clients that we would want to know if we were selling our own houses or if we were buying our own house. So that's probably the biggest thing that I can think of as far as best practices. And then outside of that, this is not going to be mind blowing to anyone, but tour, tour, tour. It is important that you go out there and see houses. We can all fall into the trap of, wow, that house looks killer. What are they doing on the price? But then you walk in and it smells like dog pee and it's a crazy funky floor plan, or it's a lot crunchier in person, or whatever. The more you tour, the greater confidence you'll have in your own ability from a pricing standpoint and to be able to advise our clients. So those are probably the main things.
Part of my job as the host of the show is to sort of repeat and what you've just said in a different way, so that hopefully listeners can grab it either from you or from me. But you are not the first person on the show. We've interviewed so many high producers that has said going to the office every day is so important. I've said this before on the show, but if you treat this job like a hobby, it'll pay like a hobby. If you treat it like a job, it'll pay like a job. And so making your, whatever that is, your routine, but get out of your house, get to an office where what they're doing is business, and go there like you would a job. And I love that you come from a place, Molly, where you were sort of wondering, like, I'm sick. Should I call in, or do I need to fill out some kind of, because you're so used to that. Like, this is where I go to work, right? I love that
Right.
that's kind of the mindset you came from. And then these key milestones you talked about, communicating with clients, such a great point for you to say, we have this realtor speak and we're in this rhythm and we're talking to other realtors and to your partner and doing the things, but your clients over here, this is not what they do for a living. And they're waiting to hear from you. They're literally at the edge of their seat when their house is on the market or looking for a house, waiting for you. And so you're forgetting to communicate with them, leaves them really feeling like, where's my agent? So having a
Right.
plan for those milestones, and then touring. I love your comments on touring. Just, if nothing else, I mean, like you said, all the points you said, but also those relationships with other brokers can't hurt for you to have those interactions with them and be able to brokers opens when we see them. You're going to be in a multiple offer with them later and they're like, oh yeah, you came and saw my listing, right? So that's great.
Absolutely.
Thank you
That's
for
gold.
those.
Yeah.
Those are great. Okay, lastly, oh, on the record, but who knows if she'll be right. This will be fun to circle back. Tell us just a little bit, and you can be as broad as you can. Be like a
Yeah.
president, political. Don't get yourself stuck in a hole here. But what do you think? What's it going to be like the rest of the year?
I think the fact that it is a presidential year, that we are in a time of voting later on, is going to probably impact things to a degree. But right now, we were, hoping the everything basically hinges on the Fed. Let's just break it down from there. We know that the Fed is in control of everybody. So I believe what I read most recently was that 90% of homeowners are at 6% or less on their mortgages.
Wow.
82% per Inman were at 5% or less. 62% were at 4% or less.
Wow.
And 23 and a half were at 3% or less. That was as of July. So I'm sure those numbers have probably changed a little bit, but those are alarming numbers, right? So when you're looking at interest rates that are, let's just say for crude math, around 6.5 or 6.75, there's not a lot of motivation for sellers to want to make a move at this period of time, especially when the cost of real estate has been going up so quickly. The irony of all of this is we know that we have a shortage of housing that goes back to the Great Recession, right? And people stop building. So we are paying catch up for that. And then you had the whole Airbnb, VRBO impact of things. All of that inventory is out of the market. You had people land banking from other countries. That inventory is out of the market. And then you have elders that are aging in place and not wanting to give up their homes. That inventory is out of the market. And then we have scarcity of land. So all of those things are kind of the perfect storm. So obviously that has lent to prices continuing to go up because demand is high and we have an incredible wealth here. And so this is going to sound counterintuitive, but honestly, for prices to come down and kind of flatten, interest rates have to come down a little bit to free up and get those folks that are out of the 2.5 to 4 to 5% interest rates into a different class, which then eventually will flatten out prices so that they're not skyrocketing. Because we were unfortunately just in that 2.5 to 4% range for too long. And so I really think moving forward, as we get closer to the election, we may see interest rates starting to come down. I'm not trying to play conspiracy theorist here, but that's my hunch, is that things will look more favorable as we get closer to that period of time. Until though it gets down to probably the 5 to 5.5 is my guess, we probably are going to see a little bit more of a locked situation where only people going, with life events are really going to be selling. I know we've been getting calls from clients that are looking for that move up purchase, and they're starting to accept things now that we've had a little bit of relief. But again, we need more folks to be willing to part ways and also jump on board for things to really, really open up. I think it'll be challenging for a lot of folks for the first, 8 months, at least this year. Inventory, as you know, is just tremendously down right now. And it's not necessarily the type of product that works for every family or every individual. So we need those interest rates to come down a little bit just to free everything up and to kind of get things going. And I'm optimistic that by the summer, things will, rates will come down a little bit more. And hopefully the industry kind of gets back on track.
Yeah, no, that was really helpful. And I think not surprising you're coming at this from a really smart perspective and a really global perspective. And there were some great things to grab onto there. I think all of us in this industry had a pretty interesting last year.
Yeah.
What a year
Yeah.
last year. And so the start of this year has been a breath of fresh air. But to your point, the Fed needs to cooperate in making this turn around and not back down to that 2% rate, of course,
Correct.
but gosh, let's find a balance there, people, and make it work for everybody. So
Yeah, because the high rates, unfortunately, are just impacting those that probably need something lower to begin with. It's not actually having the intended impact that they were hoping to have because everyone is already in a pretty strong position. So you have to, if you're trying to make that shift, you have to make it desirable for others to be willing to play in that arena. And so, if we can get back to around 5, I think it's probably a healthier place for all.
I do. I agree. Wow, this has been super fun. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. And I have taken mad notes. You've probably seen me looking down here writing, but Molly, learned a lot, and I know our listeners have too. Thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on here. It wasn't nearly as scary as I expected. So,
yay, I like that. All right, thanks again. Thank you so much for listening into Pocket Hours. I hope this has been interesting, fun, made you laugh, made you think, spurred you on to do and implement some new things in your business. I appreciate your time and hope this has been a good use of it, period. Now, go be the agent you would hire.